later. So I wanted to raise the right arm. And eventually, instead of affirming where you don't raise an arm at all, I raised my right arm and I sort of muttered, "So help me God."
Okay, I think that David Lewis might want to talk about. He's also one of these curious things called a secular Jew.
Right.
He might want to speak about that. But just before, if I could, something that I think you've made a bit clearer for me is that I've always let people have their own religion. They can believe what they like. If their religion dominates their thinking and they, to my mind, are stupid because they're religious, well, that's just part of my like or dislike of them. I've normally found, because they've been deeply religious people that I've had a huge amount of respect for because of who they are. My father-in-law, was a professor of biochemistry, very, very devout Presbyterian. I had huge respect for him, even though he knew that I was an atheist. And I always found that and it was very difficult for me to pretend to go through any of these religious ceremonies because I would be disrespecting him. He knows that I'm there as a fraud. I'm not going to go and pray in his church because that would be fraudulent. What I hadn't thought of before is that the difference between respecting the person, and if you respect the person, they can have whatever religious beliefs they like. You take it a step further and say, what you're actually respecting is their right, is their conscience. That's much deeper than just a respect for the person. You're respecting the fact that they're entitled to their own conscience, and that's what you should respect. It makes it a lot easier because then you're not. It's not just a respect for the person. You can overlook their religion because you know that is a person with a sense of conscience that is the same kind of morality that you share. You come from completely different planets when it comes to religion, but you end up with the same sense of morality and conscience. And that was the one thing. And the other is the interesting thing is that you were brought up not to believe in God. I grew up in a family where going to Sunday school and church, although some of my siblings have got religious in later years, they all went faithfully to church. I was thrown out of Sunday school at the age of about 5. My parents were told he's not Sunday school material. So I went on a path all of my own. I wasn't encouraged to go that way, but it's interesting how maybe you were forced or pushed in a direction of secularism. I wasn't. I just ended up that way. And I'm sure in our group we're going to have people that have never believed in God and those that over the years have lost their belief in God and now end up a secularist. But to come to David Lewis is this curious mixture of a person who acknowledges that he's a Jew, but he doesn't believe in God. How's that possible?
Excuse me. Right.
And before you get into Hilton Cheadle and Egypt, I must say somebody, poor old Yakub, the first name like Zach, he's got no chance of ever being first on the list.
Right. Sorry. The problem of belief.
Yeah. Sorry, David.
The problem of freedom of conscience and our constitutional framework. Unfortunately, I share company with Spinoza and Trotsky. I'm one of the few persons to effectively be excommunicated as a Jew from the broader community. I've been anathematized by a decision handed down by the Labour Court of South Africa in 2010. Where there's a long-standing dispute about my apparent identity as a Jew. For the record, I am a secularist. I'm a non-theist and most definitely a possibilian. I prefer to defer the question as to whether or not there is a God to perhaps it's a private matter between myself and my maker as to whether or not I believe or not. All too often in South Africans fall into it's a gross error that secularism is not the same as atheism. To quote George Holyoake, who coined the phrase, secularism is not the absence of religion, it's the absence of religious rules. and to be the subject of an ecclesiastical case where the unfortunately Rabbi cheat a lot. There is a case to be heard. There is a case to be made, and I would like to on record in front of a community of secularists, on record, to condemn the Labour Courts of South Africa. I condemn the ecclesiastical charges that have been brought against me. I condemn the cronyism at the court. I condemn the ANC and its cronies and the abuse of influence at the court. I condemn the right-wing intrusion into what can only be termed a reactionary revolt within the legal system. A revolt that has resulted in not only the absence of secularism. It's all very well to hear Judge Albie pronouncing it's an idealized version. Unfortunately, on the ground, I do not live in the same world. The revolt in our system, where the trashing of the Truth Commission and its final report, the trashing of the transitional justice system, where I have not only one decision, but two decisions, the most recent one last year, handed down by A.J. Martin of the High Court, effectively bashing and trashing and trivializing and reducing the report to nothing more than a report. To be in a situation where here I am, you might be aware that Albie and myself have history. I published Albie Sachs a piece, I think it was, Do You Have to Be White to Be Green? And Do Trees Have Rights? As an environmental publisher back in the day. I have a very similar but very different trajectory, having been banned on campus, having been a listed person as a result of my wanting to read Nelson Mandela's biography. I had to go through a lot of problems at UCT back in 86, 84 even. So it was 84, 86, the People's Culture Festival was banned. The revolt on campus in 87, and my work at South Press as a banned journalist, essentially writing for a banned newspaper, one of several such banned publications. A very similar history.
Yeah. David, I think I exercised my prerogative as chair. I don't want to have to ban you, but so we're going completely off the.
Yeah, we're going completely off. I'm going back into a time warp. It's a time travel.
I thought there might be a parallel or some similarities between your existence as a Jew and a secularist, or an atheist,
right,
or both, and Albie's. I don't know that this is the place for us to pick up on the other debate that you have. Again, we do respect freedom of speech, but we've got quite a long list that we had worked on before coming out today. So if you don't mind,
right.
Maybe schedule. What you're saying sounds quite horrifying, and I'd like to know more about.
I'm sure.
Maybe not here.
Yeah. Speaking as a pluralist,
okay.
Speaking as a possibilian. It's a crazy world we live in. There's a doctor of philosophy, a man by the name of David Lewis from Oz, who managed to reconcile a metaphysical worldview, in fact, recover metaphysics from its medieval past. And he's managed to square, I guess, a worldview that you can summarize it as possibilianism. I believe that we are living in a world where it is possible that a God exists, but whether or not we're living in that world is up to debate, and obviously science would defer such an opinion. Be that as it may, there are differences of approach to secularism, and I'm in a very awkward situation where it seems that the approach to secularism in South Africa is that you're either an atheist and therefore a secularist, or you're a religious nutter. You can't be both, and there's a sort of a very Cartesian way of looking at this problem faced by legal scholars. But just to put this out here, and I kind of don't want to get too abstract, but the minute yeah.
Can you also not go on so long?
Right. Can I just make one point, and you can move on. The minute a court takes up a moral position consistent with a particular version of religion, it sets itself up to ridicule. And one can only ridicule a decision that takes up a minority viewpoint and a minority opinion within a major religion. I'm not an ultra-Orthodox Jew, and I'm certainly not an Orthodox Jew per se. I have a bar mitzvah certificate from the Union of Orthodox Synagogues, but that doesn't qualify me as an Orthodox person. I argued that I'm definitely a post-reform progressive person, and those views were not good enough for Mr. Cheat-a-Lot. So I'll leave it at that, Rabbi Cheat.
Yeah, all right. You can call him that. Sounds like your case ought to end up in the Constitutional Court someday.
Yeah, the problem with the Constitutional Court, it seems to be an optional extra, like a bonus prize that people get, carrot on a stick, where the reality, unless you have sufficient funds to procure an advocate and an attorney and a large legal team, there's no way that you can make use of all these highfalutin legal things, right?
That's true. Okay, can we call it quits at that
Fantastic.
for the moment?
Sure.
Thanks for that.
All right.
I wasn't. I didn't realize I was letting loose a lot of passion.